Welcome to Hegel for Non-Philosophers Part 3. In this section, I'd like to talk about Hegel's dialectical method. Now, the dialectical method is what Hegel is most famous for developing. However, there are many misunderstandings that exist about this method. The most common misunderstanding is that the method consists of three parts: thesis, antithesis, synthesis. However, if you look through Hegel's works, this is nowhere in Hegel. And on top of that, I think the thesis, antithesis, synthesis formula actually is misleading and will not give us a good account of what Hegel's actually up to. However, there is a kernel of truth in this three-part presentation, and that's that Hegel's philosophy, at least his method, has three sides or three parts to it. These three parts are the abstract understanding, the dialectical or negatively rational moment, and the speculative or positively rational moment. Now, these three sides can be isolated just to understand what they are, but in practice they all flow into each other and can't be necessarily distinguished from each other. So what is the first category here? Abstract understanding. Now, we talked about abstraction already a little bit in the previous video, but generally speaking, abstraction is about putting things into categories, sorting them out, saying this is this kind of thing. And abstraction is necessary because we need to think in general terms. We need to place things under category. We need to identify what things are. But abstraction is limited because abstraction thinks in terms of an either or. So we say this is good, this is bad. This is right, this is wrong. This is true, this is false. This exists, this does not exist. This is the cause, this is the effect. The abstract understanding is also associated with metaphysical thinking. Metaphysical thinking, as opposed to dialectical thinking, is when we think that things fit into rigid oppositions, that they are always the same, that they are never changing, that they are eternal, and we miss that everything around us is constantly in flux, constantly changing, evolving, transforming, and so on. The abstract understanding tends to isolate things from each other. So it looks at things as if they're unconnected from everything else. Okay, the next moment, the dialectical moment or the negatively rational moment. Okay, let's go to the second moment, the dialectical or negatively rational moment. The dialectical moment is the moment where the things that seem to be stable, that seem to be fixed and isolated into this either or, become contradictory, become paradoxical, where something turns into its opposite. The dialectical moment is about taking that either or, that sharp division, and showing how it's not so sharp, showing how this one-sided way of thinking or this one-sided category actually becomes the opposite of itself. And this dialectical moment happens because the one-sided categories of the understanding, the categories of metaphysics, like cause, like effect, being and non-being, things like this, contain inner contradictions. And by virtue of these contradictions, or paradoxes, they turn into their opposites. And these paradoxes have to do with a self-negating part, that they are self-undermining, and by undermining themselves, they become the opposite of themselves. Finally, we have the speculative moment. And the speculative moment is the most important part of Hegel's system, and I think it's frequently misunderstood. The speculative moment is that moment that's frequently described as the unity of opposites, and sometimes wrongly described as a synthesis. But really what the speculative moment is just recognizing the real contradictions at work. Now, normally, when we encounter a contradiction or a paradox, we think that we've ran into some kind of problem, that we've made a mistake somewhere, and we need to go fix things. Yet Hegel actually thinks that everything is inherently contradictory. There's nothing that fits into either or categories, that everything has paradoxical elements. Everything is, in a way, the opposite of itself. Let me give an example of this. Hegel argues that when an object is moving, that in order for it to be actually moving, it has to actually be in two places at once. Think about it as in a cartoon or in a comic strip, when someone's moving, there's a blur, right? So the blur is transparent, and what it's showing is that the person is here and there, but also kind of they're where they've just been, but also not where they've just been. Because the blur, it's transparent because they're there and not there. So Hegel says that when an object is moving, for it really to be moving, it has to be both here and not here. It's both the place that it was, the place that it's going, right? It's between those places, so it's in a way in both places at once. So we can't use the one-sided category of saying things, it either is here or is not here, because for it to be moving is for it to be between the two places. To be moving from one place to another, and can't be isolated as just here and then here and then here and then here. That's not moving, that's slowly teleporting from one place to another. Moving is to be in two places at once. If somebody just remained at the dialectical moment, which is sometimes called the speculative moment, they would say, okay, well, if things move, then they have to be in two places at once. But then they would draw the conclusion, well, then motion must be impossible, or then we can't make sense of motion, because look at this contradictory result. How can we make sense of it? The speculative moment is going, no. Motion is just one of these things that is actually contradictory. To understand motion is to understand that things have to both be and not be in the same location at the same time. So the speculative moment is not a synthesis in the sense of like we've taken two moments and we've found some kind of middle ground. And it's certainly not some kind of higher standpoint where things that were apparently contradictory become non-contradictory. It's often misread as this. Instead, the speculative moment is recognizing that the truth is actually structured like a contradiction. So I'm going to illustrate these three moments using an example of a well-known paradox called the liar's paradox. This comes from ancient Greece, and it's discussed by Hegel. The liar's paradox goes as follows. You're told the following sentence. This sentence is false. You are now asked the question, is this a true or false sentence? Now, if we operate at the level of the abstract understanding, all sentences are either true sentences or false sentences, right? Because abstraction thinks in terms of oppositions. Things are either one thing or they're another thing. But is the sentence, this sentence is false, a true sentence or a false sentence? Well, let's look at it. If it's a true sentence, then this sentence is false, so then it's a false sentence. But then if it's a false sentence, well, what does the sentence say? This sentence is false, so then it's a true sentence. So notice how either determination, true or false, turns into its opposite. If it's a true sentence, then it's a false sentence. If it's a false sentence, then it's a true sentence. This would be the dialectic at work in this sentence. And notice that the dialectic is based off of a self-negation. The sentence refers to itself, yet it refers to itself in a negative way. False is a negation. And we know that it's a negation because think about the sentence, this sentence is true. This sentence is true. If it's true, it's true. If it's false, it's false. It does not turn into its opposites. This sentence is false. False negates the sentence, and that's exactly what makes it so that whatever way we determine it, true or false, it turns into its opposite. And this is an example of a classic self-reference paradox. And there are lots of these, especially in the foundations of mathematics. Now, the person who remains at the level of the abstract understanding would think that, okay, it's got to be one, true or false. I'm going to figure out which one it is, because it's got to be one or the other. But there's never going to be a paper published one day that somehow proves that all along we haven't known how this paradox is actually a true or a false statement. Similarly, if we stop at the dialectical moment, we might conclude, well, we just can't know whether it's true or it's false, or it's neither of the two, or this sentence isn't really saying anything. It would take that skeptical approach, because remember, the dialectical moment is associated with skepticism. And it would say, this is some, limit to human knowledge. We can't actually use our reason to make sense of sentences like the liar paradox. A speculative approach, however, is to recognize that the liar paradox is both true and it's both false. Because from the standpoint of the speculative moment, of the positive rational moment, one looks at the sentence and recognizes, hey, this sentence has a structure of self-negation. It's a self-sublating sentence. And so this means that if we say this sentence is true, then this is going to produce the opposite, this sentence is false. And if we say this sentence is false, then it's going to produce the opposite, this sentence is true. So what we have is a sentence where either abstract determination of the sentence leads us into the opposite determination. So really, we have a transition between these two opposites within this paradoxical sentence. And so in this way, when we've looked at the sentence speculatively, we're no longer in confusion about the sentence. We're not sitting around trying to figure out, is the sentence true or is it false, though? Because what we've understood is that the sentence is a paradox, and paradoxes by nature are paradoxical. And we've even understood why the sentence is paradoxical. The sentence is paradoxical because it negates itself, and things that are self-negating can't be determined as either true or false, because they are both. Now, when Hegel deploys this in the logic, that speculative moment is usually accompanied with an uplift to a higher moment. But I'll talk more about how that works when we go into a specific example from Hegel's logic.